And welcome back to Rush Roundtable. This is episode 204. We're going to be talking about Everyday Glory, the last song on Counterparts, as we close out our discussions on them. Glad to have Paul with us again. Alex and John is joining us for this, again, final song from Counterparts. Sorry to see it go. But closing out our theme of duality on this album, Everyday Glory covers the array between despair and hope. So let's get right into it. We got the open instrumentation, which has all three of them cranking right in. And what a great way to start the song. Wish I had access to play it right now, but I don't. So I'll get into the lyrics. And then after the first verse, we'll talk about the open instrumentation and the lyrics. In a house where nobody laughs and nobody sleeps. In the house where love lies dying and the shadows creep. A little girl hides shaking with her hands on her ears, pushing back the tears till the pain disappears. So, gentlemen, what say you?
Those lyrics went by quickly.
Yeah.
But the kind of the whole instrumentation and feel of it goes by. I don't want to say goes by quickly. That's not a good way to put it out there. But I mean, like you said, they're all kind of coming right in. As far as the guitar overdubs, he's just got solid eighth notes on some higher voiced, kind of a mostly focusing in on a bit of a C power chord, bringing in a little G just to go to the fifth, and he's got that high octave melody going. So it's a pretty straightforward song already as far as the chord progression goes, but in that respect, as far as a closing track, just the idea of just like direct and to the point right there instrumentally.
That high
I know
octave note is actually my favorite riff on the entire album.
it's not an overly complex piece. I mean, Neil doesn't go crazy on the drums, and the bass line's the same. It's not overly crazy. It's a nice. I don't want to say a soft tune, but it's a nice instrumentation to finish, like I said, to finish the album. Um, but yeah, nothing overly complex or crazy. At this point, you're just closing the album out, so do a nice tune that everybody likes. Oh, that's
I
it.
think
You know.
I think the beginning of this song it kind of sounds like you see a title that says Everyday Glory, and that's an uplifting, like, and that's how like it sounds. Like, it almost sounds like you can picture, like, like, I'm a huge fan of the Rocky movies. You hear the beginning of that song, it feels like a Rocky running up a mountain, and like a montage going through his head. So it has a very, like, it's a very appropriate, like, I can't break it down as well as you guys can with like chord progression and stuff. Like, I've never played guitar. I played a little bit of drums, but that's about it. But just it sounds like an uplifting. It has a certain uplift to it, which this song kind of is, I think. Even though it goes right into a kind of a harrowing scene with a girl kind of holding her ears while her parents argue. But it sounds like, almost like you expect the song called Everyday Glory to sound, and that's how I remember when I first heard it. I'm like, yeah, okay. When I heard that beginning, I'm like, yeah, this sounds good. I want to, let's bring it on. It has that uplift to it, and it kind of carries that thread throughout the entire song, I think.
Yeah, they have a story to tell, and this is the way they're telling it. I agree completely.
Well, it's like with Available Light had more of that introspection. So some of their songs had kind of that little muted vibe, but in this case, yeah, it's and I've thought that exactly as far as the uplifting sensibility of the song. That if you're looking for positive music, hey, we got a list we can all put together for you, and this is on it.
Reminds me a lot of Mission when it comes to the feel of it, not musically or anything like that, but just that same spiritual lift. It very much reminds me of Mission. So, jump back in the next verse just so we can progress a little bit more into what's going on with the story and get to the themes I think we're dying to talk about here. Mama says some ugly words. Daddy pounds the wall. They can fight about their little girl later. Right now, they don't care at all. No matter what they say, repeated four times, no matter what they say, no matter what they say, no matter what they say. And invoking our Donna rule, when Neil writes something four times, says it often and repeats it, this is important. So, like you guys all alluded to, it's we have to establish that there's despair here, and the theme of duality bring up there's going to be hope. So, not as a presumption, but since we know what the song's about, and the song's called Everyday Glory, and musically we've established it already, we have to establish that first, that here's our low spot. We're opening with pretty horrible situation.
And as per usual, Neil paints a vivid picture.
Yeah.
Like it's the song starts out positive, and then you go into these lyrics and you go, "Oh, it's heavy." You know what I mean?
It's
the duality.
And it's very simple in that first verse, and then the rise starts. And how many times have we said that on these, where it's the way they craft that music, where it's like music is very muted. And Alex, actually, it's literally his notes are muted through those verses.
Yep.
And I love the way how it builds. This song is all crescendo to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, and certainly as Neil has done, and they were saying even in the first doc back in 2010 that, I mean, the situation he paints, although it's like with the first verse rolling into the second, even though it is dire, dismal, or something like that, it's also every day, literally every day. It's because no matter what your family life is, if you love your family life or you have a bad life, whatever, this happens. It's just life, basically. There's a mundane aspect about it, but he's just beginning with the negative, as we're saying, where we know he's heading into the positive and the hopeful.
I also like too how he uses the word fight. They can fight about the little girl later. Not that they can talk about her later. They can care about her later. They can fight about her later. Like this is just like this. They're just like in this, and maybe like that's like the one time they'll talk about her is when they're fighting. That kind of also paints a dark picture as well. It's just I think that's not it's not accidentally put the word fight in there. You could put any word in there. They can talk to her, or talk about her, discuss her. They're gonna fight about her. Like that's kind of where these people are
until she becomes the center of their struggle.
And maybe she'll take the hands off her ears. Oh, I heard my name. So I think that's a great, like we talk about the way he paints pictures and that's when you have someone who loves words as much as Neil did. And just, that meaning of that one little word, any other word there would have changed the whole complexion of that verse. But he used the right word at the right time, like he always did.
And then the question is, was he inspired by any of his friends? Because they were all 40-ish. And just a couple of years later, with Alex Lifeson's Victor album, he was referencing in interviews for that album that it was an album, and not that I'm trying to jump onto that, but I am. It was an album that was lyrically discussing the dark side of relationships. That was the Victor album, and he was saying specifically the things that his friends had been going through since clearly he and his wife had been together since 1970, and they're still together in 2023. So you have to wonder, did Neil happen to have a friend, or did his wife, a life partner, happen to have a friend, and they're talking about it and just, oh yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's just has me thinking, just because yes.
No, and I of course won't be able to come up with the quote, but I was remembering the Mark Allen tapes, the tapes archive, and mentioning that he wanted to write a song about hope and decided to create this story as the vessel to do that. Where the inspiration comes, he obviously didn't say, but he specifically wanted to use this sort of everyday circumstance that we've been describing in order to, because that seemed to personify despair to him in the everyday scenario, and then to allow the canvas, so to speak, the word canvas, to allow for the introduction of hope as the duality, the equal but opposite to it in nature. So
yeah.
Which will bring us to the chorus of which, by the way, as we get the lyrics from their site, from Rush.com, find it interesting that the choruses were all in caps. So not something I normally see when we're doing these transcriptions. Everyday people, everyday shame, everyday promise shot down in flames, everyday sunrise, another everyday story, rise from the ashes, a blaze of everyday glory. Rise from the ashes, a blaze of everyday glory. Which I've been getting wrong for years because I thought a blaze was one word. So as opposed to a blaze, the noun, I thought it was a blaze. Shame on me. But again, the introduction of, see how half of it, as he's describing the everyday situations, it happens every day. Shot down in flames, and then everyday sunrise, and that's where the hope is introduced.
Yeah, I think everyday sunrise is the key to that because it's like you write a new chapter every day, and obviously there are some days do bleed in. One day does bleed into the next, good or bad. But there is that everyday sun. The sun's gonna come up tomorrow. As bad as it kind of go. I know this is written before, but it reminds me of the How It Is off of Vapor Trails. Kind of like the despair leads to hope, and it's not always going to be this bad or always going to be this good. It's going to be, and that's part of the glory is every day you kind of roll with it. So again, just the way he threw in those phrases at the right time, just incredible.
Well, everyday sunrise, another everyday story, rise from the ashes. Like, it's another day. Just pick yourself up and, or try to.
Yeah.
The Phoenix imagery there too, rise from the ashes.
And of course, for the chorus, I mean, like Paul, our host, was saying earlier, as far as the muted line in the verses, which I've always loved, and he's got the delay, which is creating that overlap for the 16th notes, which speaks back to Kid Gloves or even just what the Edge always did on the early U2 days. But in that respect, it just kind of had that frenetic, well, not frenetic, but that it had that drive to it, not frenetic. It was controlled. Getty's outlining the chord progression more of an A Dorian type of vibe. And at this point for the chorus, E major. It's bright. He hits that big E chord. They go to that B chord. So it's a distinct modulation from a bluesy minor, a rock or jazzy minor to very bright. So of course we're going to mix it up there to really just have a strong contrast tonality wise.
I noticed that with the bass line too. I did my usual make a playlist of each instrument's line for the entire song, and I'm my very non-musical terminology, but bass line starts here, goes low, and then starts to edge up, but doesn't quite make it up. And then as we get to each chorus, that's when everything comes in. That's when the lines seem, and I fall back on this term way too often, but things seem to come together. They become more consonant, or they become more. It finishes out. I know there's a musical term for it that I'm not coming up.
It kind of reaches like its resolution point, basically.
Resolution is the word I'm looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, because the idea there is that there's the chase in the verses, much like with the song "Cut to the Chase," there is kind of that similar sort of idea of he's got that pattern as far as 8th and 16th notes, and they reach that, as they say, they reach a resolution, but the resolution's done in a way where they keep going. That E hit is the hit, but then we're going to go to the 5 chord. Now we're going to go, and just keep moving. So, and certainly that comes from years in the industry and really looking at their craft of how do we do songs that are successful songs, I would say.
And they go back to that at all the right times, and lyrically it does flow into the music, and they create that soundscape that they pick the best song to end with. I also add, because talk about going out on a high note with all these. It's like a constant rush of dopamine by the time the song's done, because they are giving it that to that degree. Even though I don't want to get into the live thing, even though they didn't play it live, but what a great song to close with. I do wish they would have played it live. But getting back to the verses, in a city where nobody smiles, and back to that muted tone again, in a city where nobody smiles and nobody dreams. Now it seems like time has passed. In a city where desperation drives the bored to extremes. Just one spark of decency against a starless night. One glow of hope and dignity, a child can follow the light. No matter what they say, no matter what they say, no matter what they say, no matter what they say. So again, amidst all that despair, one spark of hope. Even a child can bring one spark of hope. That duality, here's that contrast.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that he mentions the city, because it kind of harkens back to Subdivisions, where the city was like where you wanted to go to, and now you're in the city and you're just as bored as you were. That I think that kind of plays into about what happens when you reach where you want to go and you're still not happy. And there's that too. That kind of weighs on you a little bit. So I thought that was really cool. I don't know if that's what his intent was. I'm sure maybe it was, but in the city, all of a sudden, suburbs where you're suppressed. Now the city is where you're just, you're grinding every day. It's not, the fun
Like
palace
you
you thought
said,
it
this
was.
isn't by accident. I think it
Right.
is. I think it was done really well.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just it's like now maybe the every day is fighting against the boredom, the monotony of getting up every day and going to work and doing the same thing. That's kind of like the glory. Now that's the glory you're rising against. They're all fighting for, and kind of two separate stories, but you're right. The despair and the hope, it's there right in front of us.
Well, even like the two lines, just one spark of decency against a starless night. You lived in the city, you don't see stars at night because it's too bright.
Yep.
That's how I kind of. You're talking about the city and being there, and not in living the mundane life of getting up every day, going to work, and like this is it. This is it. You know what I mean? You kind of want to go back, but that's how I kind of see it, right? Because if you're in the city, you never see stars. It's because there's so much ambient light, it just mutes everything. So the play on words, once again, in a glow of hope and dignity, a child can follow the light. It's amazing.
Yeah, I wound up envisioning subdivisions for a child that can follow the light. I wound up also thinking of Camera Eye with city where nobody smiles, nobody dreams. But I also did wind up thinking of the one spark of decency actually made me think back to Nobody's Hero, since that was on this album and that did speak to the murders.
The tragedies
around from Toronto down to St. Catharines at that time frame leading up to there, and the murderer who won't be named basically were based in Toronto themselves, and so it just seems like in this case this is a verse that is speaking to the various aspects of adult life and the where it could, and like the idea of drives bored to extremes. And I feel like that kind of hits on some of that where people just the behavior certainly can be, when it comes to something that's really, really extreme, I've already brought up murder. Hey, let's keep this super positive here, but that's,
Well, it's as timeless as now. That
yes.
could be yesterday or today. Drives the board to extremes.
Yeah.
Look at today.
Yeah.
I mean,
arguably worse.
Stands to reason.
Yeah.
So everything seems so much more extreme. If we view it that way, I should probably add. So yeah, I'd agree. All right. Next chorus: everyday people, everyday shame, everyday promise shot down in flames, everyday sunrise, another everyday story. Rise from the ashes, a blaze of everyday glory. Rise from the ashes, a blaze of everyday glory, which brings us into the solo.
Oh, that seems like something I should talk about.
Probably.
I think it's understood.
Well, it's if I kind of consult my little tab book here, which I think I shall.
You must.
I can say it's a beautiful solo, like every Alex Lifeson solo, but it just this is so repetitive, but it fits the song so well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's his go-to is to come up with a melodic line that is just absolutely perfect for the song. This is one of his single string solos too. Because and I've said in other roundtables, which I never thought of until I read their website, like in 2002, 2003, where he said, "Oh, a lot of my solos are one's played on one string." And back then, I thought,
"Wait a minute,
yeah." And this is one that he is laying into that B string quite a bit, doing some drone on the G, and and I think about some of the people who would say, "Well, Counterparts, that was Rush's grunge album." It's like, well, because I could see someone like citing something like that. Well, all these bands were droning. It's like, well, the Cult in the '80s, the Cure in the '80s, yeah. I mean, he's playing his scales. He's playing up and down one string. He's playing the right notes, which is probably the lamest description that I might have offered on any of these. But if I just kind of even give myself the visual that wouldn't do anyone justice on the camera, sorry. But when it comes down to it, it's the right notes at the right time, played in the right fashion, and it fits the song perfectly. And that's just basically all there is to it. Well, there's more to it, but that's what I'm saying.
And to the non-articulate listener, I'd say it's the right kind of soaring at the right point for the song as well.
Yes.
So,
and that's what I say. His single string and some of his drones are kind of accomplishing, because I remember years ago, wherever I read it, however I read it, the description of subdivisions referring to it as the gliding subdivisions, which I always loved that term. And I feel like this solo and some of the melodic lines in this song, I feel like they have that too, much like the octaves in the beginning, very, very major, but just the way he kind of moves them around, like we've already said, there's that soaring quality, a gliding quality. It's a smooth quality that does feel like it is lifting us, basically, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Which brings us into, I guess, verse 3, I guess we'll call it, where everything comes to that pause, and the vocal it takes over the song. If the future's looking dark, we're the ones who have to shine. If there's no one in control, we're the ones who draw the line. Though we live in trying times, we're the ones who have to try. Though we know that time has wings, we're the ones who have to fly.
The transcriber, the guy that transcribed this book called that the bridge, which makes sense.
Yeah, I could see that.
Sure.
Yeah, potato, right? Yeah.
Bridge it shall be. Someone
I can see being a bridge in the sense that musically it's completely different from the verses.
Yeah.
Like Neil kind of tones down the drums in the background, and it's like the focus is on Geddy singing these lines, which are very, very inspirational. You know what I mean? Like, it's when everything's looking dark, we're the ones that have to shine. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, so.
Yeah, I mean, instrumentally, I mean, the guitar goes into it's the same chord progression as the verses, but obviously he doesn't have the muted higher notes. He basically just goes into more of a strum section. So it's like verse, bridge, different verse. It's sort of it has the continuity going back to those earlier verses, but then it does have a little bit of a difference because, like you're saying, as far as the feel that Neil gives, and then the feeling that the other guys are providing too, because Geddy was highlighting the chord progression with the static high kind of muted parts, but now it's basically, all right, we're gonna have some chord strumming, breaking out the acoustic more often on this album, and then the album's going forward.
Yeah.
And then the musical punch of time has wings, we're the ones, and then it soars off, and there's that again, it lifts you up on the way out. We're the ones that have to fly. Neil again lyrically saying, okay, I've laid this out, and now here is my suggestion, or here is my call to you. Think what you will, but here's what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing too. I mean, I'm sure every era, every decade has its hard times, but obviously what's happened now in the last few years has been just crazy. And these lyrics, it's scary. They're 30 years old because they're so applicable today. And like I said, I'm sure back in '93 there was stuff going on we might have forgotten about that we really. I mean, I was 15, so I really didn't care, as opposed to now that I'm a father and a husband, I care a little more than I did. But just like, I mean, I remember listening to this song like in 2020 at the height of the pandemic and all of the, when the world was just burning, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe these lyrics are they're so applicable now, and I guess they always will be. And it's almost like, I don't want to say anger in this part, but there's a tinge of like, hey guys, we gotta come on, we stop complaining,
like a call to
arms.
I agree.
Yeah, we gotta do this.
Passionate.
We got to do this. Yeah. Again, it's not so much angry. It's just because, hey, you got, rise above. Let's go. You got
exactly.
The sun still rises. So yeah, I guess I remember reading those lyrics back then, and it's like, oh my gosh, wow, unreal.
And it's interesting to see the evolution of how Neil's talked about glory or written about glory. I'm not going to quote them all, but going back some of the earlier stuff, Something for Nothing, it's very individualized back then. And then if you go even from Cygnus X1, in a final flash of glory, nevermore to grace the light. The weapon, it's more about fear. Marathon, one moment's high, glory rolls on by. That's, while it's not in a negative sense and not even in a selfish sense, it is more about the individual than big money, power, and the glory. The pass, raging at unreachable glory. Again, individualized, brings us to bravado, just off roll the bones, striving for excellence in life, and then big wheel, fame, and still the selfish edge. But now here we are with Counterparts, where it is more about, it could still be about self, but it's definitely more utilitarian might be the word I'm looking for, but definitely more about, do this. Inspirational is definitely the word I'm looking for. But just more altruistic.
There's some, like a little my brother's keeper in here, kind of. It's like
Yes,
someone's
yes.
just got to someone's got to stand up and lead the way.
Yes.
Is what it boils down to. Like you can just sitting around and saying, "Man, times are tough." We can't have everyone doing that. Someone has to say, "Times are tough. Here's how we fix them." That's the impression I got from that part.
Agreed.
Take out those pajama pants, put some real pants on, and deal with it.
Well,
kind of applicable during the pandemic. I know for me it was, but I know what you're saying. The overall sentiment is that at some point you have to kind of pick it up and just do something, right?
Yeah.
And even the importance of words, like you mentioned earlier, though the word though actually jumps out at me. Though we live in trying times. Hey, I get it. Things are rough. Though we live in trying times, we're the ones who have to try.
Mm-hmm.
Though we know that time has wings. In other words, okay, yeah, it's fleeting. We're the ones who have to fly. Don't let time pass us by. Do something.
Yep.
So that's my
and try too, because you try, you might fail, but you got to try.
Yeah, try. Which, how many times have we talked about that in the last 3 albums? So
exactly.
Yeah.
And we got to mention Geddy's vocals on this song are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
He's still I think at this point he's still in his what I consider his prime, from like Power Windows right up to Counterparts. And even you for a stretch, Test for Echo, I find that break they had in the late 90s, it came back a bit different. And well, I guess, but with like anything, this has been discussed before, age, time takes its toll on his vocal cords. But at this point, he still has the power behind his voice. It's very melodic. I think we've talked about this before. The peak was probably Presto, but he's still his vocals on this song are really awesome. They came out really nice.
Very understated, dude. The whole song is kind of understated. Even I think the solo by Alex, like even when even Neil's drums are understated. It's still a great drum part, but there's not a lot of acrobatics going on. And even when Geddy gets high, like no matter what they say, it's not his trademark like shriek. Even he kind of reins that in a little bit. There's a lot of
we have to thank Rupert Hine for that.
Yeah, this whole song is very
have some place to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
He finds that high note, but it's melodic. It's not a shriek like you said. Like in the 70s, it was a shriek.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. At the time, that was awesome. It was but for this point in their career, him shrieking is probably not even possible even if you wanted to. I mean, it's hard on vocal cords.
And certainly going through the synth era, I mean that's just, they weren't really there, so it's like just emerging into a new rock era, basically.
Matured into, exactly.
And obviously too, I mean, in the 80s, you figure you had, the go-to, especially for a lot of the metal bands, was to hit the high notes. Queensryche, right. Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, King Diamond, et cetera. But I mean, by the time we got into the 90s, people were tuning low, they were singing low. By the end of the 90s, it's like, hey, let's have a 7-string guitar and see if we can tune that down to the basement. But I mean, even early 90s, it's pretty much, all right, we're kind of in this mid-range. We might have some higher notes, but they're not going to be forced unless you're still a metal band who's now playing in Japan and Europe. But at that point, it's basically, all right, we have a wider appeal. Let's appeal to a wider group of people.
Right.
And I think it came down to even the capacity to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
some of these bands you mentioned, they were big in the 80s. By the 90s, they're starting to. I mean, the boys released Counterparts. They're what, 40, 41 years old at this point?
Yeah, 40.
You know, they're 40-ish. I mean,
yeah.
not that it's old by any stretch, but you know, I
Oh,
think
no.
they've proven. But I think like John mentioned, like it's one of those songs that's overlooked. I don't know if it's because it's the last song on the album. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's a great song. It's a great way to finish the album.
I was going to say, on an album whose theme is duality, I love the fact that even though they never pick sides, this one, you cannot walk away from this song without having that hope.
Mm-hmm.
They had a choice musically. They could have left you neutral. They could have left you. I mean, think of even the songs off the Fear trilogy. We just came off Halloween, where that definitely left you feeling a certain way. They had a choice here. They could have left you feeling the despair and made that how you felt. And you walk out of this like, time to make a difference. So, and on that happy note, closing thoughts. I that says it for me as far as I'm concerned, is they leave us feeling that hope and that high note.
And like you said, it's unfortunate that they never played this live on either Counterparts tour or subsequent tours. It would have been a good that would have been a good breakout for like the Art 40 tour. Just break that one out of the middle of nowhere. People would have been like, what?
Yeah.
You know.
And I think that's the reason it's overlooked. It was never played live. I think that's one of the reasons why it's kind of
Could very well be. Yeah.
part of the catalog.
And by this time, CDs had so many songs on them that, that you had a bunch of songs. It's now like, oh, we have 7 songs on this record. It's like, no, we got like a dozen songs. So we were putting that last. Some people might just, whatever. I mean, obviously, most of us who would be on or watching this, we obviously let the CD play and let the tapes play and heard it and liked it. And other people just kind of tuned out after Cold Fire and kind of like walking out of the theater or a game early just to beat the traffic.
Good analogy. That's a great analogy. Yeah.
Oh, they're up 9-0. They're not going to come back. I'm going to leave it in 7. Then you get home and you find out they won 10-9. Yeah.
Exactly. See what they missed out on. And thank you all for sticking with us through this album and through this episode. So don't forget to please like and subscribe. Share this video. Please comment. Let us know what you think. Is this an untapped resource? Is this in your top Rush inspirational songs? Have you given this a listen lately? If not, why not? Let us know. And if you want to join us on these roundtables, please do keep an eye out. We will have, if it hasn't already appeared on your screen, an email address. You can join us, please. We have Test for Echo coming up next. We want people to talk about it with us. So in the meantime, thank you again from us, and we will catch you on the next one.